My father's exact words were, "If you walk out that door, don't you ever come back." I walked out. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had $8.3 million sitting in a business account and a lease already signed on a two-bedroom condo in the West Loop of Chicago that I'd been paying for in cash for the past 14 months. I didn't correct him. I just picked up my bag, the one I'd packed the night before, because, honestly, I'd seen this coming, and I left. That was a Thursday in November. By Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee on my own balcony, watching the city below me, and thinking about how strange it is that the people who are supposed to know you the best can actually know you the least. Let me back up. My name is Natalie. I'm the youngest of three in a family where being the youngest means being the most watched and the most dismissed at the same time. My mother is a family law attorney. My father spent 30 years as a federal judge before he retired 2 years ago. My older brother Derek followed them both into law, Georgetown undergrad, Yale Law, clerked for a circuit court judge, the whole thing. My sister Pam married a cardiologist and runs a non-profit that their social circle considers deeply impressive at dinner parties. And then there was me. I did everything right for a long time. I was pre-law at Northwestern. I was on law review. I had a summer internship lined up at my father's former colleague's firm. I was, by every external measure, on track. What no one knew was that I had been running a business since the beginning of my junior year, and by the time I was sitting in my con law class pretending to take notes, I was already clearing more money per month than my internship would have paid me in a year. It started almost accidentally. I had always been good at understanding how things looked, not just visually but strategically. Why certain brands felt trustworthy and others didn't. Why some websites made you want to buy something and others made you close the tab. I started doing freelance brand consulting for small e-commerce businesses my sophomore year just to have spending money. I charged $300 for a brand audit, then $800, then $2,500. Word spread in ways I didn't expect. And somewhere in my junior fall, a skincare startup found me through a referral and offered me $18,000 to do a full rebrand. I did it in 6 weeks, working nights and weekends. They launched the new brand and their monthly revenue tripled within 90 days. They told 2 other founders. Those founders told 2 more. By spring of my junior year, I had a wait list. I never told my family. Not because I was ashamed, I wasn't even then, but because I knew how they would receive it. My father would have called it a hobby. My mother would have asked what the long-term career path was. Derek would have been politely skeptical in that way he has, where he tilts his head and says, "Interesting, but..." And Pam would have changed the subject back to whatever fundraising gala she was planning. So I just didn't bring it up. I graduated law school. No, I should say this correctly. I started law school. I enrolled the fall after Northwestern because it was the plan, and the plan was everything in my family. But 3 months in, I knew. I sat in my contracts class one Tuesday morning, and I had 3 client emails sitting unread in my phone because I hadn't had time to get to them. And I thought, I am paying $67,000 a year to sit here and learn about things I will spend my career doing for other people, when I could be building something of my own right now. I withdrew at the end of that semester. I didn't tell my parents for 4 months. Those 4 months were some of the best of my life. I moved my freelance operation into an actual LLC. I hired my first contractor, a designer named Bex I'd met through a client. We started taking on bigger clients, fashion brands, wellness companies, a few funded startups. I moved out of the apartment my parents had been helping me rent and into my own place, the one in the West Loop. I stopped taking any money from them entirely. I thought about telling them. I rehearsed it a dozen times in my head, and every single time I got to the part where I explained that I'd left law school, the conversation went sideways in my imagination before I even got to the good part. I kept waiting for the right moment. There wasn't one. They found out the way parents always find out the things their adult children try to keep from them. Someone told someone who told someone. A friend of my mother's apparently knew someone at the law school, and they mentioned in passing that they hadn't seen me around. My mother made a few calls. By the time she called me, she already knew. That call was a Wednesday night in October. I remember I was reviewing a pitch deck for a client when my phone rang. She didn't yell. My mother rarely yells. She was cold and quiet, which is worse. "Your father is going to want to talk to you," she said. And then she hung up. My father called 11 minutes later. He did yell. I tried to explain. I told him I had a business, that it was real, that I was making real money. He wasn't hearing it. To him, business coming out of my mouth meant something embarrassing and temporary. He told me I had thrown away everything they had given me. He told me I had disrespected every sacrifice they had made. He told me I had a choice: come home for Thanksgiving, apologize, and figure out how to get back on track, or don't bother coming at all. I told him I was doing well and that I wished he could be happy for me. He said, "If you walk out that door, don't you ever come back." I said, "Dad, I'm not even at the house." He said it didn't matter. He meant it as a principle. And then he hung up. I sat on my couch for a long time after that. My friend Danny. She's known me since freshman year of college. She was the only one I'd been fully honest with about everything. She came over that night with takeout, and we sat on my floor, and she let me talk through all of it without offering solutions, which is exactly what I needed. At some point, she said, "You know they're going to come around, right?" I told her I wasn't sure I needed them to. The next 2 years were not a straight line. I want to be honest about that, because whenever I hear stories like mine, they tend to skip the middle part, and the middle part is where everything actually happened. The business kept growing. We moved from freelance-style consulting into a full agency model. I brought on a small team. Bex came on full-time, then a strategist named Theo, then 2 account managers. We niched down into consumer brands in the wellness and lifestyle space, which turned out to be a smart move because that market was exploding. I learned things I would never have learned in a law firm: how to lead people, how to hold a client relationship through a hard launch, how to read a profit and loss statement and actually understand what it was telling me, how to fire someone, which is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. There were months that were harder than I expected. There was a quarter where we lost 2 anchor clients in the same 30 days, and I had to cut everyone's pay by 15%, including my own. I lay awake a lot of nights that quarter running numbers in my head, trying to figure out what I would have to do if things didn't turn around. They did turn around, but I didn't know they would. I did not call my parents during any of this. Not because I was still angry. I had moved past anger pretty quickly, honestly, but because there was no version of that call that didn't involve me either pretending things were fine or explaining things they hadn't earned the right to know about yet. My brother Derek texted me once, about 6 months after the Thanksgiving blow-up. He said, "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay." I texted back that I was fine and asked how he was. He replied with a summary of a case he was working on. We talked like that for a few exchanges, cordial and careful, and then it just stopped, the way those conversations do. Pam never reached out. My mother sent me a birthday card in April with a check for $200 inside. I thought about what to do with that for a long time. I eventually deposited it because it seemed more complicated to send it back. Then, in the March of my 3rd year running the business, something happened that I had not planned for. A journalist from Forbes contacted me. She had found me through one of my clients, a sustainable activewear brand that had gone from $800,000 in annual revenue to just over $12 million in 2 years while working with my agency. And they'd mentioned us in an interview they'd given about their growth. The journalist wanted to write about what was behind the number. She wanted to talk to me. I agreed to the interview. We did it over video call, and then she asked to visit our office in Chicago. And I said yes to that too. At that point, my agency had 17 full-time employees, and we'd crossed $4 million in annual revenue for the agency itself, separate from equity stakes I held in a few client companies. My total net worth at that point was around $8.3 million on paper. I didn't know what the article was going to look like. I gave her honest answers and figured it would be a sidebar or a small feature. It was not a sidebar. It ran on a Tuesday morning in May, a full feature with a photo taken in our office, under a headline that I'm still a little uncomfortable looking at, because seeing your name in a headline is just inherently strange. But it was real, and it was out in the world, and by Tuesday afternoon, my inbox had 340 new messages. My brother was the first family member to contact me. He called, not texted, called, and when I picked up, he said, "Natalie, I just read the Forbes piece." There was a pause. He said, I had no idea. I said, I know. Another pause. He said he was proud of me. His voice cracked slightly when he said it, and I wasn't expecting that, and I had to look out the window for a second. My mother called 2 hours later. She was careful and warm in a way that felt effortful, and I could tell she had been sitting with what she wanted to say. She told me she had always believed in me, and I let that go without commenting on it, because I was 31 years old and I had stopped needing her to be consistent. She asked if we could have lunch. I said I'd let her know. My father didn't call that day. He called on a Thursday 2 days later. I almost didn't pick up. I did. He didn't open with an apology. He opened with, I saw the article. And then a long pause. And then he said, I want you to know I'm not the kind of man who can't admit when he's wrong. I waited. He said, I was wrong about what I thought you were doing. I was wrong about a lot of things. This is where I want to be honest. Because I think a lot of stories like this turn into either a dramatic reconciliation or a dramatic reconciliation or a dramatic rejection. And what actually happened was neither. I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated in the way I may be expected to. What I felt mostly was tired and also something like sad. Not for myself exactly, but for the time that had passed. All those years of building something real while they had no idea. All those nights I was working late in an office my own father didn't know existed. I told him I appreciated him saying that. I told him I had needed him to believe in me before the Forbes article. There was a very long silence on the phone. He said, I know. That was it. Just I know. 2 words from a man who could speak for 2 hours without stopping. I think that was the most honest thing he had said to me in years. We didn't solve everything on that phone call. I don't think we were supposed to. I agreed to come home for Christmas, and I went. And it was strange and careful and also sometimes genuinely okay. Danny came with me as my plus one, which I had told my family about ahead of time, and they were kind to her, which mattered to me. Pam was awkward around me all day. I think she didn't know what to do with the version of me that didn't need her approval. Her husband was actually more natural about it. He asked genuine questions about the business over dinner, the kind of questions that meant he was actually curious and not just being polite. I liked him more after that dinner. My brother and I talked for almost 2 hours that night, after everyone else had gone to bed. We sat in the kitchen, and he told me he regretted not pushing back when my father made the ultimatum call. He said he had thought about it a lot. He said he should have called me himself that night instead of waiting 6 months to send a vague text. I told him I agreed, and I said it without anger because I meant it that way. That felt like the real reconciliation, actually. Not the Forbes call with my father, that quiet kitchen at midnight with my brother admitting he hadn't done enough, and me saying, yes, you're right, and both of us still sitting there. I want to say something about money because I know that's what a lot of people focus on in stories like this. And I understand why, but I want to be clear. The money was never the point. The money is evidence, sure. It's proof that the path was real, but what I actually wanted, what I had wanted the whole time and never quite found the words for when I was 22 and trying to explain it to my father, was to build something that was mine. To know that I was capable of that. To stop borrowing someone else's definition of what a good life looked like, and start living inside my own. I know what some people will think. They'll think I should have been more open with my family from the beginning. And honestly, maybe, probably, there are moments I look back on and think I could have tried harder to bring them along, to show them the work before it had a headline attached to it. I wasn't perfect in this story, and I want to say that clearly. But I also know why I didn't. When you're building something that the people who love you have already decided is foolish, it is very hard to keep building it and keep defending it at the same time. At some point, you have to choose. I chose to keep building. I made that choice over and over every morning for 3 years, and I don't regret it. The agency is 42 people now. We opened a small second office in Austin last year. I started an annual brand program 6 months ago, $10,000 each, to 5 early-stage women founders in consumer brands who are pre-revenue but have real ideas. The applications were incredible. Reading through them reminded me of who I was at 22. Full of something I didn't have language for yet. Just trying to figure out if there was a way to make the thing in my head exist in the world. There is a way. That's what I know now. It is harder than anyone tells you. and lonelier in stretches than you expect. And there will be people who love you, even, who will not understand it and will say so in ways that hurt. And you will have to decide every single day whether you're going to let that stop you. My father came to see the Chicago office in February. I showed him around, introduced him to the team. He shook everyone's hand. He looked at the wall where we have framed campaign work from some of our biggest brand launches, and he stood there for a long time without saying anything. When we were leaving, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You built a real thing, Natalie." I said, "Yeah, I did." We went to dinner after, just the two of us, at a place I like in the neighborhood. We talked for almost 3 hours. It wasn't the conversation I had imagined having when I was 22, standing in my dorm room rehearsing things I never ended up saying. It was better than that, actually, because it was real. Two people who had both gotten some things wrong, sitting across from each other, trying to figure out what came next. That's the thing nobody tells you about these stories. There's no single moment where it all resolves. There's no dinner where suddenly everyone understands and the music swells and it's over. It's just a series of smaller moments. A phone call, a kitchen at midnight, a man standing in front of a wall of your work without saying anything because he finally doesn't have to. You just keep going, and eventually, sometimes the people who love you catch up. I've thought a lot about what actually caused everything that happened. Not in a bitter way, just trying to understand it clearly. And what I keep coming back to is this. My father wasn't a cruel man. He was a man who believed that love meant steering, that guiding someone towards safety was the same thing as believing in them. He was wrong about that, but he wasn't wrong from a place of not caring. That distinction took me a long time to be able to hold without it feeling like I was making excuses for him. The cause and effect of this whole story is pretty simple when you lay it out. He pushed, I pulled away. I pulled away. I built something. I built something, and the distance that felt like abandonment on both sides turned out to be the exact condition I needed to find out what I was actually capable of. That's not a comfortable thing to say because it means the pain had a purpose, and I'm not sure I would have chosen it if I'd known. But I didn't choose it, it just happened, and I had to decide what to do with it. What I chose over and over was to keep working. That sounds simple. It wasn't. There were nights, especially during that hard quarter when we lost 2 anchor clients, when I would have given a lot to be able to call my father and hear him say it was going to be okay. I didn't have that. So I had Danny, and I had the work, and I had some stubborn part of myself that just refused to let the thing fall apart. I think that's what people miss when they hear stories like mine. They think the point is the money, or the Forbes article, or the moment my father stood in my office and finally said the right thing. But the real thing, the thing that actually changed me, was all those ordinary mornings where I got up and chose to keep going even when no one who raised me believed I should. That's where character gets made, not in the dramatic moments, in the quiet, repetitive, unglamorous ones. I'm not the same person I was at 22. I'm more patient with people who don't understand what I'm doing. Because I've lived long enough now to know that understanding usually comes later, if you give it time. I'm more honest about my own mistakes, because I made real ones in this story. I could have tried harder to bring my family along, and I know that. And I'm more careful about the difference between protecting myself and just being proud. Because those two things can look identical from the outside, and they feel very different on the inside. Derek said something to me that night in the kitchen that I've thought about a lot since. He said he regretted staying silent, and I think about all the moments in our lives where we have a chance to say the true thing and we don't, out of conflict avoidance, or because we tell ourselves it isn't our place, or because we just don't want to make things harder. His silence didn't make things easier. It made them lonelier. The lesson I carry from all of this isn't about success. It's about what you owe yourself and what you owe the people around you. Honesty even when it costs something. Courage is just honesty with higher stakes. I wish I'd had more of it at 22. I'm trying to have more of it now.